This is Mrs. Gable. I'm ahead on Chapter 10, Section 1. This was one of the longer sections that we've done, and it will be the longest one that we do, especially in this chapter. The other sections that we do later on are not going to be as long. So the Civil War has begun. It began with a Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in 1861. First off, we went over the advantages of the Union, which is the North, and the advantages of the Confederacy, which is the South. Okay? So the Union has twice as many people as the South, and the North has a whole bunch going for it, such as they have more farm production, they have more factories, a stronger naval force, more railroad lines, which are going to be very, very important for transporting troops and supplies throughout the war. If you make sure to take a look at the pie charts over to the right, that just truly illustrates how much more the Union had than the Confederacy. Okay. In the South, the Confederates had the ability to fight a defensive war on their own soil. Knowing all the ins and outs, all the hills and valleys makes a big difference. And they also had an outstanding military leadership. Okay. The other last big thing is that the way I've been describing it in class has been they didn't need to win the war. They just have to make sure that they don't lose to the Union. That they want to make sure that they hang in there long enough that eventually the Union is going to get tired of fighting them and just leave them alone. Okay. One of the first big battles is going to be the First Battle of Bull Run. All right. The South technically wins, but it did not come easily. For the North, that is a huge wake-up call, that this isn't going to be a piece of cake just because they have all of these additional things that the South doesn't have, doesn't mean it's going to be easy. So they know it's going to be for the long haul, so they set up what's called the Anaconda Plan. All right. And the Anaconda Plan is actually a huge snake, okay, that, why can't I spell this? Sorry, I'm going to pull up that picture that I showed in class, because I think that really just nails it home of what it looks like. All right, because it's going to attack on 3 different fronts. All right. There we go. So we have over here on the right-hand side is the naval force of the Union is going to be here and bombing the eastern coast. Okay, it's going to snake around and set up a naval blockade. And block is in the word blockade, and that's exactly what it's doing. It's blocking any goods like cotton from coming out of the South and going and sailing over to Europe for trade, and it's preventing anything from Europe to come in to possibly help with the war. Okay. The third front is going to be making sure that the Union can control the Mississippi River. The hope is that if they get control of the Mississippi River, that all these states over here are now cut off from the rest of the Confederacy, and that the Confederate troops won't be able to use it as a transportation line. Because reminder, the South doesn't have as many railroad tracks as the North has. Okay. Ultimately, it does work. There's some hiccups along the way, but the Anaconda Plan does work, as we'll see as we go farther and farther into the reading. Then we have Antietam. Okay. Antietam was the attempt for Confederate General Robert E. Lee to try and invade the Union. Okay. He's going to invade the Union up in Maryland, and basically it is the bloodiest one-day battle in American history, with more than 20,000 soldiers killed or wounded. Okay. Even though that many people lives were lost, it ends in stalemate. It's a tie. Nobody wins, nobody loses. They're basically back to square one. Lee retreats back into Virginia. Even though there was not a true winner, the problem the Confederacy has is now that Lee lost a lot of his army. Okay, he lost a lot of lives, which is going to help the Union win later on. Then we have the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay. In Chapter 9, we learn that while Lincoln is opposed to slavery, that's not why he wants to fight the war. He wants to fight the war so that North is reunited with South. They are one country once again. But now, as the war continues to drag on, he's like, well, maybe freeing the slaves would be a good idea. And he's looking at it very strategically, because freeing the slaves would mean that they would win support from Europe, where people have been opposed or against slavery for a very long time, as well as freeing the slaves would mean that the South loses its workforce. Okay. So after a while, he proclaims emancipation. He signs the Emancipation Proclamation, which basically gives freedom to all of those slaves that are in areas that are rebelling against the United States. So it doesn't free all the slaves. If there are slaves that are in areas loyal to the Union or under the Union control, they are still slaves. So this is only for states that are openly rebelling against the U.S. Okay. All right. Ultimately, the Confederacy ignores this. All right. But now the Union has a bigger purpose, and it means that if the Union wins this war, okay, that will mean the abolition of slavery, the getting rid of slavery, okay, abolishing it. So as time goes on, in 1863, Union General Grant is trying to get a hold of Vicksburg, Mississippi, okay, which is along the Mississippi River. This takes him 6 weeks for him to ultimately be able to get Vicksburg. Okay, the Confederate Army does surrender and the Union gains control of the Mississippi River. Okay, so that was a huge win. So that Anaconda is starting to really tighten in on the Confederacy. And then we have the Battle of Gettysburg, the deadliest conflict in the Civil War. Confederate General Robert E. Lee tries to invade the North a second time. He brings in his 75,000 troops and meets a Union force of 95,000 troops in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This lasts 3 days. Okay. Ultimately, the Confederacy needs to retreat because more than 50,000 of their soldiers were killed or wounded. Okay, that's a huge, huge amount. The North ends up victorious in the Battle of Gettysburg. So, we're almost to the end here. That Anaconda, again, is getting tighter and tighter with the Vicksburg and Gettysburg win. So now we have total war. Okay, sorry, my food's here. All right. Total war. All right. And this is a plan set up by General Grant. All right. And basically, it's a two-prong attack. Okay. What total war means is to not let anything get in the way and leave nothing behind. Okay. So Grant is going to march over to the west to Virginia to reach Richmond, which is the capital of the Confederacy. And we have a new general from the Union called General Sherman, and he's going to march south towards Atlanta and then finally back up along the Carolinas. Okay. So, with that, I'm losing my place. It works. Okay. Sherman does what is called Sherman's March to the Sea. He destroys everything valuable that they encounter. If they can't use it or take it with them, they burn it. They get rid of it. They don't want the South to be able to use it. And he burns so much that it ends up destroying 60 miles wide of just total destruction. Okay. So while Sherman is doing that, sweeping towards Atlanta and going up the Carolinas, Grant is fighting Lee over in Virginia. Grant is able to capture Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, and that means Lee has to surrender. All right. They surrender at what's called Appomattox Courthouse. All right. And they agree to different terms of surrender, which they were very generous. Confederate officers could keep their weapons. Any officers and troops who claimed their own horses could keep them. Most important, each officer and man will be allowed to return to his home, not to be disturbed by United States authorities. So everybody's allowed to go back home, essentially. Right? And that is the Civil War in a very small nutshell. All right. There is more battles, there is more to it, but that is the bones of what we need to know. All right. Thank you very much.